Hey, welcome to Bridges Live. I'm Dr. Paul Dyer. Welcome to a conversation I'm going to have with my guest. I'm going to let my guest introduce herself because, as many of you know, if you watch some of my shows, I hate introducing people because we all have a way of saying who we are, and nothing describes us better than who we are. And I think you're going to get into an understanding when I talk about the science of health and mental health and things like that, that when people describe you, it actually can hurt you. And when you think you're describing yourself, you're actually putting yourself down. And that goes into probably exactly what we're going to be talking about. So Tammy, please, thank you. Welcome to Bridges Live. I'm Dr. P. Everybody knows that. But introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. My name is Tammy Ginsberg. I am the president of the Maryland chapter for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I'm also on the National Loss and Healing Council for the same organization. I am a therapist in private practice up in Frederick County, Maryland. And I am a mom to two 20-something boys and a wife and a dog mom and lots of other things. But my passion is mental health. It was not my first career. It was something I came into later because I have such a passion for it. And by the way, I'm also, since we're talking about mental health, a suicide loss survivor. I lost my brother Brian in 1988, the day before my 21st birthday, actually. So that sort of started my path into working in mental health.
And that's what I mean, people. When we are talking about whatever we're talking about, we bring who we are, and no one can ever describe that. Maybe some of you know, maybe some of the things you've heard me say, and maybe some of the things you've seen me say on whatever show I'm on. I always bring my authentic self, and I am a suicide survivor. And that's is really what got me into the anthology of human development and human behavior, because I had to save myself from my traumatic experience. And my traumatic experiences extended from when I was a child to when I was in the service, to being a dad, and to being a Black man in the United States. But I learned what, how, and when. And so now I'm able to go into the deep parts of the how and the chemistry of the how. But thank you, Tammy, for doing all what you do. And suicide touches Black men, it touches men, it touches military, it touches a lot of men. Most people don't actually ever know that, but more men kill themselves than anybody, right? And this is very dear to me because I lose so many people, so many friends, and even my own children have either talked about it, attempted, or been in the hospital because we need not to understand what suicide is, because everyone's individual, but we need advocates. And what disturbs me is that very few people talk about it when it's so prevalent, and especially since the pandemic issue. How can we develop advocates? Tammy?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah.
You were well, you know, one of the things that AFSP does is advocacy. And it's funny we're talking today because we just finished, usually we go to Annapolis once a year. We get advocates from all over the state to come with us. We meet with delegates, we meet with senators. We have certain things that we're pushing for. And this year and last year, it was virtual, but it was just as powerful. We did it via Zoom. And look, like you said, suicide, mental health does not discriminate at all. Every age, every nationality, every ethnicity, all over the world. So there's nobody that can say, well, this doesn't affect me, because it affects everybody. And because we all have a brain, right? We all have mental health, right? I mean, you have a brain, you have a heart, you have heart health.
Right.
We have a brain, we have mental health. So in answer to your question about advocates, I think it just continues to be getting the word out that we are here wanting to bring these advocates in, because we certainly have plenty of people that have been touched by this and that would be willing to come or write a letter. We have field advocates that all it takes is, we even fill in, give you the template and you fill in the blanks and you send it to your delegate or your senator. The more easy we make it for people, the more advocates that we get. But it's also talking about it. I mean, that is that is my passion. My personal passion. Right. Education, getting the word out, destigmatizing, and letting people know it's okay to not be okay. Let's just talk about it.
So here's the thing. We data, we can do data until the cows come home. But why aren't we talking about it? After the many years, if I don't bring it up in a conversation, people who know me would be like, Paul, you didn't bring up, suicide tonight. And I'd be like, I didn't. What did I bring up? Because it's a part of what in the Black community. I literally have to beat men over the head to say, come on, you need to let people know that you're not okay. And it's okay to not be okay. So why is it so difficult that you found that we're not talking about it?
You bring up something that reminds me. I was on a panel some years ago, maybe 4 years ago, and there was a Black man who was telling the story of how, I don't know if he was a teacher, but he worked in a school with predominantly Black students. And I think they were predominantly Black males. And he brought up suicide and mental health. And, one of the kids raises their hand and says, why are we talking about this? This doesn't affect us. This doesn't affect our community. And I think that is the basis of where we need to go to let people know, yes, it does. We may not talk about it. And maybe in certain communities, I know in the Asian community, it's not something, right?
Right.
So, but that's why we need to get into these communities and we need to talk about it and normalize it and let people know that, just like you talk about your broken foot, where you had the flu or COVID, God forbid.
Right.
Why are we not talking about all of our struggles with mental health? Because everybody is challenged at some point in their life with their mental health. Not everybody necessarily becomes suicidal.
Correct.
But everybody's struggling.
But I do, and I want to push back. Everyone can always reach me on all the social media and all the things that they put out and all the podcasts. I want to push back to say, I have not thought about suicide. I want someone to call me up, email me, send me a fire smoke signal, shooting star that says, you know what? I've never thought about it. I want age of the person, and then I want ethnicity. I do, because I am completely flabbergasted. Whoever sends me that note and says, I don't know, because my pushback is, I'm not sure if you recognize that you thought about it. That's the difference, because there's words we use that says that you don't want to be here. It's not as so much as I want to kill myself. You could use words as, I don't feel like I fit in. I don't belong. Those are suicide signals. Those are flares. Right? In certain settings, I feel sick and nervous around these settings. That's a signal. Whether that's a suicide signal, so I could letting people know those small signals are signals. Now, do they manifest you driving off a bridge? Like you said, probably not. But they're still signals. How do we teach people about the signals?
Oh, you listened to one of our presentations called Talk Saves Lives, because it is a wonderful program. It's a 40-minute presentation, and it basically is suicide prevention 101.
Where do they get that? Where do they get it?
You can get that for free. All you have to do is go to afsp.org/Maryland, and you can find our director, Pat Albrecht. You contact her, you let her know where, when, and we will be there, whether it's in person, virtual. And that's just one of our programs. I mean, that's just that one. We have one that's specific to students, to parents, to those that are supporting somebody who's struggling. We've got a ton of resources, and that is what it is about. I mean, I could sit here right now and tell you, here's what to look for, and here's what to do, and here's how to talk to somebody, and I got all that.
Right.
but really you need to hear it yourself and sort of figure out how does this fit into my life. I've got to tell you, it's unfortunate how many times I work a lot in my practice, and so many times it is so heartbreaking and tragic when they say, I didn't know what to look for. Now that you're telling me my loved one was doing this or was saying that or was showing this, but I didn't know that was a sign of somebody possibly thinking of killing themselves. So we've got to hit as many people as we can. I go into health classes at high schools and talk to the kids about it. I'm out there, we have walks all over the state of Maryland, all over the country. I'm just talking about Maryland because that's where I live.
Right.
But we have walks in the fall, and you don't even have to raise money to participate. We'd love if you did, because we got lots of things we're doing. But you don't have to if you're just looking for community. If you're just looking for people who understand your struggle.
Right.
You go to these and you have community. So the more we can bring in diverse cultures, different age groups, different people to really understand how prevalent this is, the better it will be. That's how people say, how do we prevent suicide? We educate.
Right, we educate. So when you go to Annapolis, in Annapolis in Maryland is where we go when legislation happens, where they meet, and it's a state capital city. Here's the question: what do we have to convince these people of? I don't want to hear names of who we got to convince. But why do we have to convince something that is still like, it seems almost like we got, I'm a little bit tongue tied because it seems idiotic that we got to convince a legislative group to support suicide that touches everyone.
Well, have you ever talked to a politician?
I have. Yeah. And people know I work with a lot of politicians. I work with a lot of people who are running for office, and I put a lot of things in their ear. Now, what happens when they get there, I don't know.
I mean, look, they're wonderful people. They're here to represent us, but they've got 1,000 other people coming to them also and asking for money for this and asking money for that. And I mean, truthfully, I haven't talked to a politician who hasn't said, or even if it was a staff member, that they haven't been touched by this. So in theory, of course they're behind it, but they have a job to do. And by the way, we also go to DC once a year and we speak on a national level, to our legislators as well. We have to keep it front of mind. We have to keep it front of mind. If we don't keep it front of mind, everybody's going to get ahead of us with what they need and what they want. And so, even though they don't on a personal level need to be convinced, they have a job to do too. So the hope is that we just get in their ear enough that they're behind the things that we're asking for.
I wanted to do this show. I was so excited about doing the show specifically because suicide is so important. But here's the thing. We need things. We need a lot of things. Let's list 3 things we need as a state, as a people, but as a cultural of understanding. Do we need money?
We need money.
Okay. And that's to support programs that people are in because they have to pay for the programs. The programs are free. What does the money do when people support the programs? How does that work?
Yeah, it depends on what we're doing. I mean, for AFSP in general, we do 4 things. We do research, we do advocacy, we do education, and we do healing and loss support. Everybody's a volunteer, except for the few people per state that are at the head, but everybody else is a volunteer. But the research costs money, creating the programs costs money, and then the things that we're also asking for on a legislative basis has nothing to do with raising money for AFSP. Right now, our biggest ask, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there is a national hotline number starting July 22nd that's going to be 988. So you've heard about that.
Yeah.
And even though it's national, and even though it's supported nationally, we still have to raise money in the state of Maryland. We're asking for $10 million from our legislatures as a trust so that we can have the equipment, so that we can train the people, so that when somebody calls that number, they're getting somebody in the state of Maryland who knows the Maryland resources. It's wonderful that we can answer it, but it's somebody in North Carolina, that's still an answer.
Correct.
But It's not the same as what you're going to get. So, there's always a rhyme and reason for what we need the money for, but it's also, I mean, we have bills to help our veterans. Right now, there's a bill to
Right.
make mental health services more available to college students.
Yes.
College students go to their health center and they're told, sure, well, we can help you in 2 months.
Yeah, in 2 months, right.
That's like telling somebody with a broken leg, yeah, we'll set it in 2 months, right? That's not okay. So what we're asking money for is to help the cause as a whole.
Here's the thing, we know Maryland's the richest state in the United States. To not fund this would almost be purposeful to cause the death. It seemed like they could be brought up on charges to not fund the number to help. Now, I don't know anything about Rhode Island. And I don't know anything about any other state. I do know Maryland has the money. So for them to not do it, that would seem almost purposeful. It almost seems disastrous, actually.
Definitely be tragic. It would.
Your research. Let's talk about the research.
Mhm.
How are they researching suicide? Are they researching some of the, what are they researching?
Well, they're researching a lot of things, but one of the main things that has been so promising for so long is to try to, if you're familiar with depression and depression medications, we know that when you go to a psychiatrist, they will put you on an antidepressant, but they can't promise it's going to work because
Correct.
everybody's body chemistry is different. So you could be suffering. It's like, again, that broken leg.
Mm-hmm.
You could be suffering because the pain of a mental, unless you've been through it, you don't understand, but the pain of depression is so severe that for somebody to say to you, take this medicine, it might work. Let me know in 3 weeks how you're doing.
Right.
How horrible. So they've been working, one of the things that they're working on, and there's been some efficacy in it, is being able to take your blood and say, this is the medication that's going to work.
Okay.
I mean, how much more hope would we have? How much less suffering would we have if somebody knew, take this medication and I'll feel better, right? As well as therapy. I mean, I'm a big proponent for, therapy as well as medication, but sometimes we need them in conjunction.
Right. And sometimes we need the chemistry balance immediately.
Yep.
Right. And we don't have facilities we don't have enough facilities for veterans, I know, to keep people physically safe if they're going through an episode.
Mm-hmm.
We used to put them in jail. We used to put them in psychiatric wards.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't have enough safe places. Do you think that's possible on Horizon? Do you think people can actually, how would you call advocacy homes, where people can come and say, I don't feel safe, and we say, okay, this is an advocacy home and you can go to XYZ home and they will make sure you're okay for at least 72 hours. Now, they can't keep you for a week because that's not what they're built for, but this home has adequate people that does this, like kind of like almost like child protection. You think we could build those homes?
I mean, possibly. Right now, the law is hospitals do that, exactly with that 72-hour hold. Now, I've worked in one. I have clients that have been to them. It's not always the best experience.
It is it?
But
Right.
we're working on that too. We have programs to train medical personnel, to train first responders on how to be compassionate, on how now not to put, I mean, we don't do it anymore, but you're right. They used to put people in handcuffs. You'd call 911, they'd come with the police car, put you in handcuffs and take you to jail. What does that do? That's like somebody's having a heart attack. Let's put handcuffs on them and take them to jail. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. So yes, that would be great. But, my personal opinion as a therapist, if you're going to do that, you also need to have an on-site psychiatrist, an on-site therapist. You don't just want to put people in a safe place. You also want to be helping them, which is the other thing that, sometimes people don't get what they need in the hospital. So all of this stuff needs to change, whether it's a house that we build or it's the hospitals themselves. I don't care where it is, as long as it is somewhere that somebody can go to be kept safe.
See, because I thought of what you call advocacy homes, and that's where I came up with this idea. I'm thinking, because there's many times when people how I knew didn't feel healthy, I said, come here. I'm coming to go get you. And you can stay with me until your heightened comes down. We still got to get you to a therapist. We still got to get you to a doctor. But right now, you're being looked after, because a lot of times people who are in those episodes are alone. And when they're alone, after as the episodes continues, that's when suicide becomes very easier.
Mhm.
So if they're with someone, they're less likely. So that's the type of home I'm thinking of. And I think we can support those homes throughout the country and say, now they don't take the place of hospitals. They don't take the place of therapy. And then knowing that they're in a safe space, they have the resources, a therapist comes to the house, talks to whomever's there. I don't know. I was almost thinking of like a safety bed for kids when they're going through an episode, right? I think we need to have these places.
I think that that would be great. In lieu of that, we have other precautions that
Right.
we have people put into place if we're worried that somebody in our home might be suicidal. Um, and sometimes the person who's suicidal doesn't have the wherewithal
Right.
to even make that call to a friend, to a hospital, to the helpline, to anyone, because when you are in that place of suicidal, you don't see outside of that pain. So that's a whole nother, piece of it as well.
You know, it seems with this conversation, people, I just want you to know, as we're talking with Tammy, this is not all on the person. And people have heard me say this before. Being a person who loves another, it is a responsible of you to recognize what is off. Are you going to miss some things? Yes, I get it. And there's a sandwich. Someone has to say, and you have to respond. If someone doesn't say, you have to notice, to ask. So there's a little bit of gray area right there that I don't think enough people recognize. I think we're so stuck in our own selfishness. I'm going to call it what it is. And we don't see the ones we say we love. I'm not even talking about the people we don't know. I'm talking about the people we say we love. We don't notice. How can we get better? What are some of your ideas of better of noticing?
We have to know what to look for. And we also have to know, this is a big one. People will often think that they're afraid to ask somebody if they're thinking about suicide because they think they're going to put the idea in their mind, right?
No.
We know from research that that is not the case, that what it actually does is it normalizes. It makes that person think, wow, this person gets it. This person's here to support me. And so that's the first thing. We have to know that if we're worried, it's okay to ask. And you can't necessarily know for sure the person's going to be honest with you, but our hope is that you have a close enough relationship that they will. You have to know what to look for. I mean, that's important. If somebody in your life is suddenly avoiding people, not going to things that they normally do, quitting a sports team that they've been on forever, not going to church anymore, sleeping all the time, not sleeping at all, eating, overeating, not eating at all, talking, saying that life isn't worth living, that they don't have anything to live for, being not really caring about their safety, not wearing a seatbelt or crossing a street when they shouldn't, or anything that is not normal for that person. And that is why connectedness is so important. And, COVID took that a little bit away from us for a long time, of really knowing each other and our habits and what we do, so that we do know what to look for and how to have that conversation and what to say when you have that conversation, and then what to do after you have that conversation.
I lived in the Midwest, and I did suicide advocacy for the Native Americans that lived in North Dakota, Minnesota. And the Native Americans have been committing suicide at such a high rate. It's the numbers are so staggering. It almost seems like it's unbelievable, but it's so high. I mean, out of 10 high school kids, you got 5 of them committing suicide. They're just not making it. And I think that the idea is, what is it worth living for? at such a young age, and I've seen it growing up in New York. I've seen it in the different economic depressed areas. Do you think that some of the programs we could do nationally, or even in Maryland, that we could do better at of getting to these neighborhoods that says someone cares for you? Is that something that the advocacy is working on also?
Absolutely. Not only the advocacy, but just us in general. I mean, we try to make connections at schools, at churches, everywhere, because we know that if we can get in and educate people, something will change. And I have to correct one thing that you said, just because I know you're so open to this. We're trying really hard to not use the word commit anymore around suicide. We're trying to say killed themselves, took their life. And the reason for that isn't to be nitty pitty. It's because when you say commit, the next thing that people usually hear is crime or sin,
Wow.
right? Somebody
Right.
committed a crime, somebody committed a sin. You don't commit suicide. Somebody's taking their life because of a mental health episode, just like a heart attack, right? Just like a heart attack or an aneurysm suddenly took your life. Suicide took your life. So, then that's another piece of it is educating. We talk to the media about how to responsibly talk about suicide so that we don't have this contagion around it, right? So there's lots of different pieces, and we really are involved in all of them, but the bottom line remains education. I mean, what is advocacy really? It's education, right? Supporting our healing and loss is more than education, but that's a piece of it. So research, education, it really comes down to let us know as much as we possibly can about this topic so that we can reduce the numbers of people taking their lives. And when you talk about those rural areas and Native Americans, it's huge there. They don't have the same access that we do in a bigger area. There's a lot of alcoholism, drug use, not a lot of support. So we do have people going, and I know that there are people from SAMHSA that go to these reservations, that go to Alaska, and they spend time with these people. And again, try to educate, try to help them. So it's all of that.
Give us some numbers, give us the website again, and give us those pieces so people can get those information and how to reach out to the organization if they want to help. I'm going to ask everyone to just reach out, because you don't know whether you can help or someone can help. So reaching out after you hear this, just reach out, get the information. It may not be for you, but it could be a friend of yours. And you're going to have that information like, hey, I heard something. This is perfect for you.
Yep. And I just want to say, I know numbers are not a big deal, but over 47,000 people take their lives every year in this country. Somebody in Maryland dies by suicide every 13 hours. So we're talking big numbers here that really we have to do something. So right now we still have the crisis hotline, 1-800-273-TALK. That will be, I'm not sure if they're going to keep it in service after 988 comes on July 22nd, but it's going to do the same thing. So for now, there's that number. In the state of Maryland, you can also dial 211 and then dial 1 for mental health, and you can get help that way. AFSP.org will give you all kinds of resources, and not just in the state of Maryland. In the state of Maryland, go to afsp.org/Maryland, and there's all kinds of resources there as well. And you'll also find our area director. So if you would like a program, and we don't care if we're presenting to 3 people or 300 people. Every person matters. So if you're at a work environment where you're like, we really need this. We have a Talk Saves Lives for the workplace, right? We have one for veterans. We have just a standard one. We have one in Spanish. So reach out and let us know that you'd like to have that program, and we will do it. Again, we have the program called More Than Sad for educators, for students. If you're a human being, we've got something to educate you. So reach out, let us know, and we'll help.
Thank you so much, Tammy, for visiting with me and all the people that gets this and gets more of it. But there's more to come. There's more to reach out. There's more to do. There's always work to be done. And thank you for all the work you are doing. I super appreciate it. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me on and letting me touch your audience as well. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Please be safe. Have a great night and be loving and kind. And everyone, please remember to be compassionate, be loving, and be concerned. Ask those questions, look for those signs, and say something. If you see something, say something. And if you don't know what to say, ask, get the help so someone can say something to the person that you did notice. Because you're out there, we're in here, we're everywhere. But if we touch each other, we save each other. Thank you.